Politics can be brutal, and politicians engage in internal manoeuvring all of the time. I scratch your back and you scratch mine sums up how most things work in Westminster. After all, we have a two-party system which rewards loyalty over everything else. But the latest story to emerge from the lockdown files, based on private WhatsApp messages between Matt Hancock and various colleagues, advisors, and journalists, pushes that ethos well beyond the realms of decency. According to The Telegraph, Hancock discussed blocking funds for and get this, new centre for disabled children and adults in order to pressure a dissenting colleague so they would back new lockdown restrictions. The messages were between then Health Secretary Mr Hancock and his political aide Alan Nixon as they discussed taking a plan for a learning disability hub in Bury, Greater Manchester, quote, off the table if James Daly, the MP for Bury North, sided against the government in a key parliamentary vote on lockdown. The Telegraph even has screenshots. Alan Nixon, this is the advisor to Hancock. I think we need to dangle our top asks over some of these 2019 intake MPs who are going off the boil this coming week. Thoughts on me suggesting to Chief Spad that they give us a list of the 2019 intakes thinking of rebelling, so there will be a spreadsheet, so to speak, of the potential ways they could get these guys. E.g. James wants his learning disability hub in Bury. Whips call him up and say, health team want to work with him to deliver this, but that will be off the table if he rebels. Alan Nixon goes on to say, these guys' re-election hinges on us in lots of instances, and we know what they want. We should seriously consider using it. IMO. Matt Hancock, yes, 100%. James Daly's Bury constituency is the most marginal in the UK mainland. It has a majority of just 105. Daly told The Telegraph he was appalled and disgusted by the messages, but that he had also never been contacted by the party's chief whip over the issue. It's also important to say he voted against the government's proposals on COVID tiers. He told The Telegraph this: they were never proposing to give it to me. I still don't have it. That sounds very typical of the Tories, doesn't it? Even though I've repeatedly campaigned for it. Hancock never showed the slightest bit of interest in supporting it. I had a number of conversations with Hancock at the time, but I can definitively say the hub was never mentioned. I think it is appalling. The fact that they would only give a much-needed support for disabled people if I voted for this was absolutely disgusting. Jake Berry, the Conservative MP for Rossendale and Darwin, reacted to the story by saying this on Twitter. This is an absolute disgrace. Hancock should be dragged to the bar of the House of Commons. I presume he doesn't mean strangers' bar, where they drink pints, some of them far too many. First thing tomorrow morning to be questioned on this. Hashtag Hancock. And here was Jonathan Gullis, another Tory MP, discussing the matter with Talk TV.
Any WhatsApp groups you're in you want to tell us about?
Well, I'm waiting to see what Matt and I exchanged in text messages because I changed my phone. So I've lost all my previous messages. So I hope maybe Matt Hancock will be able to shed light on what boring conversations we have with each other. But I mean, what a disgrace to see the attitude in which he displayed. James Daly is one of the finest parliamentarians I've seen in the House since being elected in 2019. Successfully campaigned for Gig Lane to get the funding it needs so that fantastic football stadium remains at the heartbeat of the community. And to see the callous disregard for what he has worked so hard for his community on with the Disability Hub and to be used as a weapon is appalling. I've never, in my time as being a parliamentarian, had any such threats. Neither has James, clearly, based on what he has said. But the fact that those type of conversations gone behind the scenes is wrong. Parliamentarians work damn hard. They get community support. They make the business cases. And I hope Matt Hancock does the right thing and apologises to James for even considering that as an option. He doesn't deserve it. And I'm very sorry because I'm sure he's having a terribly tough day today with this being on the front page of The Telegraph.
Michael, is this something to get worked up about? Obviously, a special needs centre being used as a political pawn is awful. It's about as bad as it gets. But is this just lifting the curtain on how politics as usual functions at Westminster?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I mean, also, the biggest story in a way here is that the Learning Disability Centre was never going to get built anyway. I mean, they've spoken to this MP. The MP said this wasn't actually used as a bargaining chip, but I've never got it in any case, right? So, I mean, I think what's going on here is the Telegraph are trying to make out that the campaign to get people to vote for a lockdown was more brutal than any other sort of legislative campaign by a sitting government. And therefore, that makes lockdown a less legitimate policy than all the various other laws that a government would pass. But this is, par for the course, right? It's kind of to be expected. Doesn't necessarily make it pretty. And I think, this is probably a reason why you want to have a slightly different electoral system. You have proportional representation, and you don't necessarily have majority government where you can have law and policy made by party leaders bullying MPs, and that's all they really need to do to get laws passed. I think it would be better if you had to have a sort of persuasive process between people who are representing different parties, and then potentially these whips would have slightly less power than they currently do. So I think there is an argument as to how one could remove the power of the whips in instances such as this. But yeah, I mean, I'm still yet to see a single surprise in these lockdown files from the Telegraph, and especially I think that's because a lot of what is being done in these WhatsApp groups is sort of consider stuff, right? Lots of it isn't particularly thought through. Like in this case, they didn't threaten this guy and say, we're not going to build this centre in your constituency if you don't vote with us. In fact, it seems as if they've never mentioned this centre to him at all. He's been asking them for it and they've been ignoring him, which is part of the cause for the Conservatives. I mean, it's also it's not a particularly healthy situation if where you build a learning difficulty centre is in the whim of the national government, and they can just put it in the constituency as a gift to any old MP. This is why it's really important to actually properly fund local authorities, because they're going to be the people who are actually pretty well placed to decide what infrastructure a local community needs. So, I mean, I think the background to this story is over a decade of Tory austerity, where you've got MPs desperately begging central government for things which should be standard in any constituency, in any community, but now they have to go begging to the central government to say, well, the local council can't afford this, so can you please swoop in and gift our community a basic service? I think that's disgusting. I think the sort of legislative wrangling is, or the expose, let's say, of this legislative wrangling is the Telegraph essentially trying to cause trouble about a policy they've never liked.
I think that's right. But what you said earlier as well about how this sums up Conservatives, I mean, it is extraordinary that a key piece of health infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, the health secretary only thinks about it as a way of effectively threatening a colleague. It's not about, okay, how do we do it? How do we deliver? How do we build it? How do we project manage it? How do we help people? No, it's just a bargaining chip to exert pressure on somebody. That's how they view everything. And it's terrifying. And also the comment you said about the role of the whip. We hear so much in the media about bullying and harassment, momentum of bullying people in politics. The biggest bullies in British politics are the chief whips. And that's not some conspiracy theory. It's not something I've just clutched out of my brain. That is literally their role. They maintain discipline through a coordinated, permanent, 24/7, 365 campaign of bullying, intimidation, and threats against their colleagues. Very few people overtly say that in legacy media because, of course, they need to be on good terms with many of these people to do their jobs. But I think that the power of this story is, like I said at the start, it lifts a lid on politics as usual, this one in particular. There's nothing special or extraordinary or outrageous about it. Of course, this is outrageous, but the point is, that's the norm.